This Let's Edit with Media Composer tutorial is brought to you by VideoGuys.com, the leading reseller of video editing and production equipment for more than 25 years. And by Boris Effects, a leading developer of visual effect plugins, titling, video editing, and workflow tools for broadcast, post-production, and film professionals. Hey everyone, Kevin P McAuliffe here, and I am back again with another Let's Edit with Avid Media Composer tutorial. And in this lesson, we are going to get into Media Composer, and we're going to talk about the very first thing that we see when we launch the application, and that is the project selection window. The project selection window not only lets you select the project you want to work on, but you can also get in and create new projects with standard raster dimensions, or get in and create your own custom size projects for you to work on projects like Instagram, Facebook, and even Snapchat. Alright, so let's Command or Alt and tab into Firefox. As you can see, we are in the Avid Download Center. And this was something I should have mentioned in our previous lesson when we talked about the Download Center, but more specifically when we're talking about Mac Catalina users. Now, we did mention that Mac Catalina users do not have the ability to utilize the standard title tool and marquee title tools because those are 32-bit applications. Catalina is 64-bit applications only. However, if you're like me and you are not upgrading to Catalina just yet and you're still on Mojave and you download the newest version of Media Composer, it will not have the title tool or marquee title tool installed. You have to do that as a separate application that you can find right here. Media Composer Legacy Components 2020.4, which is when those were introduced. You can simply download, install. I don't know if you need a restart or not, but if you do, you can simply restart, launch the application, and you'll be all set to go, just like you were in 2020 I guess I'll say 2020.2, because I don't know if there was a 2020.3 update. But I did just want to mention that because I think it's something that's important, because, you know, if you have a moment like I did when I reinstalled Media Composer, you're sitting there going, where are my title tools? That is what you have to do if you are working on a Mac. All right. So let's hide out of Firefox. I'm just simply going to Command or Alt and tab into Avid Media Composer. And we are now at the project selection window. Now this is the very first window that you will come across when you first launch Media Composer. It should look fairly empty the way that I have it here. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that right now you'll see that the location that I am going to is in my Volumes, Media 1, into the Avid Projects folder. Now, this is because I do have my location set to go to an external hard drive. You'll see there's the location right there. I'm just going to cancel out. I did recommend in a previous lesson that you send all of your projects and media to an external drive, so we are just following along with that suggestion that I had given. Now, a couple other things that I do want to point out that'll become a little bit more relevant once we start creating projects is you'll notice that we can zoom in if we happen to be in thumbnail view. We of course don't have any thumbnails because we don't have any projects yet. However, if we did, we would see them in here. And last but certainly not least, let me just switch back to list view here. We can set our font size, not so much the actual font itself, but more so the size. And we can also remove columns from what we see here if we want to. Now, why would we want to remove any of these columns? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. The name is probably pretty important. All right. Frame. Do I really need a thumbnail to tell me what the project is that I'm working on? Probably not. But if you like to have thumbnails, you can get a thumbnail of the project that you're working on once you start bringing media in. Project type, that is the raster size of the project, 1920 by 1080, 2048 by 858, etc., etc. Frame rate, color space, you'll see that we have raster dimensions here, stereoscopic, creation date, and date modified. Now for the project type, this is probably going to say, 1080, 23976p or something like that, whereas the raster dimension will actually give us the 1920 by 1080, 2048 by 858, etc., etc. But let's now get in and let's actually create a new project so that we can see exactly what is going to happen. Now, what's important to keep in mind, and this is something that I always stress, and I think it's something that you need to ingrain in your brain, which is when you are creating your project, it doesn't matter the frame rate of the media that you're working with. The only thing that matters and the only thing you need to consider when you're creating your project is how do you want to export your final master. When you create your project, you are creating the preset for your final export. Every piece of media you bring into your project will conform to that frame rate. Not so much the raster dimension, just the frame rate. When you create a project, the only basically parameter that is locked in that you cannot change is the frame rate. You set it to be 23976, it won't change. You can change the raster dimension to, 1080p 23976 to 2K 23976, 4K, 8K, doesn't matter. 23976 is the frame rate, and that's the way it's going to stay. Now, we also do have the ability to create custom projects that we'll get to in just a little bit, but let's create a project first to get us rolling. So what I'm going to do is simply click on where it says new project. Now, this is a little bit deceiving, and I gotta be honest, I'm not a big fan of the new project selection window. If you come from Media Composer pre, I think it's 2020.4, we had a different project window that I was a much bigger fan of, and there's one big reason that I'll talk about in just a little bit. This is a little bit confusing if you're not actually, knowing that these are actually tabs to switch back and forth between as opposed to an actual button that will open up a new window. But nevertheless, if we want to create a new project, we're simply going to click on New Project. Now, the first thing I want to do is give a project a name. So we're going to call it Let's Edit with Media Composer. This is where we can get in and set the format. And the format will dictate the raster dimension. Now, again, like I said, it doesn't matter what size project you create. So for example, I'm going to create a 16K, doesn't matter, 23976 project. All right. It's going to give me whatever the raster dimension is. It's crazy. It's huge. It doesn't matter. All right. Color space, I'm going to leave this as Rec 709, which is what it defaults to when I'm creating a new project. If I had a film project, I could set up the default film type. If I was working in stereoscopic, I could set that here as well. There's also an option as to where you want to put any bin search data. For me personally, I want to have it default to be put within the project folder, which is why I'm going to leave everything the way that it is here. Now we'll get to presets in just a second, but I don't want this project size. I really just want a 1080p 23976 project. Don't worry, I'm going to show you how we can tackle that in just a second. Here's my biggest problem with the new project creation or project selection window. If you're an assistant editor, let's say you're working on a show like Survivor, and you know that Survivor has, 25 episodes, all right? The way that we used to do this was that if you wanted to create 25 projects, a project for each episode, you'd simply come in here, you'd create a new project, call it episode 1, create a new project, episode 2 in the project selection window, and then you just go through and select your projects. In the new version of Media Composer, you now have to create a project. Once Media Composer creates it, you have to step into the project, then step out of the project to create a new project. Then once that project is created, you're going to step into that project and step out and go and so on and so on. So imagine doing that with 25 different shows where every time you have to step into the project and then step out. I've already voiced my concern with the powers that be at Avid. I said this is a very stupid way of doing things. So I'm hoping that this will be updated in an upcoming feature update, which I wouldn't even call a feature update. It's called a please fix this because it's dumb feature request. But what we're going to do here, because I don't mind stepping into the project because I want to show you how we're going to change our raster dimension, we can do it like this. So again, 16K, not what I want to work with, but that's okay. 23976 is the only thing that matters. I'm going to say create, and Media Composer is going to create the project for me. Now, to be honest, you wouldn't even know this was a 16K project until you started bringing media into it. Now, how do I know it's a 16K project? What I'm going to do is I'm going to press Command Shift and the equal sign or the plus symbol on the keyboard, Control Shift and the equal or plus sign on the keyboard, and that's going to call up my project settings. Now you'll notice the preset is of course set to be 16K 23976, which is not what I want, but I did say that the only thing I'm locked into is the frame rate. So what I can just do is just simply come down to HD 1080p 23976, select it, and my project has now been immediately switched over. You'll see the raster dimension has changed, which I could change if I needed to. All right. Now, we're going to talk about mask margins in an upcoming lesson, so just ignore that for now, but you'll see that we do have some flexibility after we've created our project. Now, let's talk about custom projects. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close out of this project. To close out of the project, fairly simple, Command Shift and W on the Mac, Control Shift and W for all my Windows friends out there. We will simply close the project. And once we're back to the project selection window, you'll see I have this fantastic thumbnail of the project, which is, to be honest, I don't have any media in the project, so I'm all I'm going to see is the little media composer symbol. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here and shut some of these off. So let's just go. I don't really care about the frame. Project type is fine. Frame rate is fine. Color space, raster dimension, stereoscopic, don't care. Creation date I do care about. And I'm just going to say OK, and you'll see that's a little bit easier to deal with now. And of course, if you wanted to, you could view things by the thumbnail as well. All right. So let's just switch back here. Now you'll notice in here we also have the ability to say name, project type, etc., etc. in here. But to be honest, I'm not really going to be getting in and dealing with things in thumbnail view because I'm not a big fan of it. I've always been a fan of list view. So this is how we're going to view things. Now, let's talk about a custom project, meaning you're going to be using a specific raster dimension 1:1. Maybe you're dealing with Instagram. Maybe you're dealing with Facebook or Instagram stories or even Snapchat 9:16 aspect ratios. So how do we get in and create this? Well, the trick is that we want to create these custom project types, but I don't want to create new projects when I'm doing it. Okay? I want those project types to appear when I go into the settings inside of my project if I want to switch over to one of them. So here's how you're going to go about doing that. I'm going to select new project, but what I'm going to do is instead of actually creating the project, I'm going to come down here to manage presets. And we're going to create a new preset. Okay, and I'm just going to call this IG/FB story /Snapchat. Okay? And for our width and height, you'll see it's not a valid name, probably because I use slashes. That's fine. We're going to call this IG_Facebook_Snapchat_story. Now let's see if it'll let me use the underscores. Perfect. All right. So what we want to do is we want to set this up to be 1080 by 1920. So what we're going to do is just punch in 1080 by 1920. Now you'll see it automatically made the aspect ratio 1:1, but this is going to be by 1920. So you'll see now the aspect ratio is the correct aspect ratio of 1.78 to 1. Now the frame rate is going to be, of course, 23976 because we want it to match the project's frame rate that we're working in so we can switch over to it if we want to. So I'm happy with this now. So what I'm now going to do is add another one, and I'm just going to call this IG for Instagram. Now we're just going to say that Instagram in this case is going to be 1:1. Now I know in some cases it's slightly different. You know, I think it's like 5:4 aspect ratio, but we're not going to worry about that right now. All I'm going to do is set this to be a 1:1 aspect ratio with a frame rate of 23976. Once I say OK, I don't need to create a new project to actually get these to appear in my project. All I need to do now is to step back into projects, and I can simply launch the project that I have currently selected. So let me just say open. And once the project is open, what I'm going to do is head back to my project settings, Command Shift and the equal sign, Control Shift and the equal sign for all my Windows friends out there. And what I'm going to do now is come to presets, and you'll now see that I have some presets up here at the top, which include the Instagram and Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat story. Now the reason this is important is because I'm working in the proper frame rate. So when I switch to that project, I'm now dealing with a 1:1 aspect ratio at 1080 by 1080 or even a 9:16 aspect ratio. What's important is to keep in mind is I'm not really going to see any results of this until I actually start bringing media in, but this is now how you can create custom project raster dimensions quickly and easily right from within the project window without having to create a new project to do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to my actual proper raster dimension here of 1080p 23976. And what is important to talk about next is exactly what we're looking at here. The entire Media Composer interface, which we're going to do in our next lesson. All right, now as we're wrapping up, I want to remind you to check out our sponsors, Video Guys, for all of your Avid software and hardware, as well as thousands of other products that you can check out over at videoguys.com. And I also want to give a big shout out to the team at Boris FX, makers of Continuum, Sapphire, and Mocha. And don't forget to use that coupon code of MC101 to get 10% off your next continuum purchase. If you like this tutorial, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and don't forget, if you have any questions, you have any comments, or you have any tutorial requests, don't hesitate to send them to me at kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot for watching.